What's going on, everybody? It's Ricky with Video Homicide, and today we're going to be talking about another one of my childhood favorite films. This time it's from 1993, and it is Leprechaun. So Leprechaun is a movie that came to me, and I've mentioned this before on the channel. My dad had picked up Clown House and Leprechaun on the same day, so I was probably like 3 or 4 years old. It's one of my earliest memories is these two tapes being brought home at the same time. I remember we watched them. Clown House was like a total, I still love that movie. And Leprechaun, I think I love even more because it was sort of my first exposure to really franchise horror, kind of, like the modern day horror icon. So I was already well-versed, well, not well-versed, but I'd known about Dracula, Frankenstein, the Wolfman, the Mummy, all your kind of universal horrors, and even like Dawn of the Dead and Day of the Dead, and just like that type of film, because I was limited to what my dad owned, and I think a lot of people were in that boat, or limited to what the rental stores had. But I've talked about this before on the channel as well. Like, we would go to the rental stores, and I would always want to get like these scary movies and like these gangster films, and my mom was always like, no, we're gonna get something that we can all kind of watch together, meaning like my mom, my brother, my stepdad, because my brother's like 6 years younger than me, so we were watching movies like Mike and stuff like that. Whereas I wanted to watch like these movies like Maniac. Like I remember seeing like Maniac in a rental store, but not watching it for like 15 years later. You know what I mean? So Leprechaun was just one of those movies that was always on the shelf, always easy to grab. Very, me and my cousin Chris, who I've talked about before on the channel, like we always used to watch these movies together. And then it was like right after Leprechaun was exposed to us that like Michael Myers films, Freddy Krueger films, Jason films, all those kinds of movies. And then it was kind of like this explosion of all these franchise type horror films, because when I was a kid, I didn't know there was movies out there like The Burning and like Sleepaway Camp and Slumber Party Massacre. And even though some of those are franchise horror, I just like I said, we were limited to what we either my dad owned, my aunt owned, or what we rented. And we didn't rent a lot of, back then we kind of rented a lot of the same. Like we would just re-rent the movies that we knew we loved, and then my dad would like tape them. So we had like copies of Halloween 1 and 2, and I remember like falling in love with those movies. Even though they scared the shit out of us, I fell in love with them. And Leprechaun is exactly that same boat. Like I didn't even know that there was sequels to Leprechaun until I was probably like 8 or 9, when I don't know how, but like another family friend had like lent us a copy, or like a bootleg VHS tape that had, I think, Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome on it, and I think it had The Fly 2 on it, or there was some weird movie like that. And I was like, holy shit, like there's more Leprechaun movies? Like, this is crazy. I love Leprechaun. And to get into the film, it starts off with this man who has just returned home from Ireland. He saw his mother buried and cremated and all that kind of stuff. Or, that's, what I'm saying. Like, the mother was cremated, and then he brought the ashes home. Although, he didn't really bring the ashes home. What he did was he robbed this leprechaun, played by Warwick Davis, who's fantastic in the film. He robs this leprechaun, brings home the gold, and like an urn, like the leprechaun's coins are in this urn that's supposed to contain his mother's ashes. And his wife is like, you're drunk, blah, 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 what the hell is going on? And he's like, these aren't my mother's ashes. And he smashes the thing, and he's got all this gold. And sure enough, the leprechaun, using his magic, just appears, or maybe he was in the briefcase, that's what it was. And he basically kills the guy's wife, Mr. O'Grady. He kills Mrs. O'Grady, throws her like down the stairs, breaks her neck, all that kind of shit. And O'Grady comes downstairs and basically, I forget how, but he like knocks this leprechaun out, and he puts him into this crate, and then he hammers the crate closed, and then he puts a 4-leaf clover on top of the crate so we couldn't get out of it. But then he has a stroke, and he ends up in like a nursing home for the rest of his life, essentially. And then flash forward years later, Jennifer Aniston and her father have bought the property. So they show up at the property, they're making, they're fixing it up and that kind of stuff. They got like these painters, which consists of like these 3 guys. There's like one guy who's like the quintessential hot guy, like the young brother who's like 12, who I thought was like fucking cool as shit when I was a kid. And then there's like the doofy kind of, friend guy that's kind of like nuts, and not nuts, but like he's not all there. And even at one point, like when this young kid and the doofy guy find the gold, they're like, you can get a brain operation. and all this. And it's like, what? I remember when I was a kid, I thought that was weird because the doofy guy was like, I can get comic books every week. And this kid's like, we can fix your brain. Like, what the fuck? You don't say that to your friend. Like, I mean, when you're a kid, you say some crazy shit. But anyways, so as they're fixing up this place, the father, they're all kind of hanging out outside, and Jennifer Aniston's leaned up against this truck, and then she feels something rub her leg. And I remember she's like, something rubbed up against my leg, a man rubbed my leg. And the dad's like, it could have been an old alley cat. And she's like, no, I know what it feels like when a man rubs my leg. And he's like, you do? And it's, Jesus Christ, man. And then the dad, who like, he hears like this cat noise, which is really the leprechaun, inside of this log, like this hollowed out kind of cartoonish log. And he sticks his arm down there. I don't know why he would do this. This always bugged me. Like, why the fuck would he stick his arm into that like wet looking, dirty old rusty log? And of course he gets bit to shit, so he goes to the hospital. So the father character is now taken out of the picture, not dead, but taken out of the picture. And now it's Jennifer Aniston and the three guys, and they have to deal with this leprechaun. But Jennifer Aniston doesn't want to believe, she thinks everything's crazy, you guys are crazy, blah, blah, blah. And eventually they see it, and then it kind of starts its attack on the house. So they go through all these different trials and tribulations with the leprechaun in the house. This all happens in one night, by the way. So, at one point, one of my favorite parts in the film, me and my dad always quote this, Ozzy, the dumb guy, he finds this like old bicycle bell that, you'd put on like the handlebars, and he's ringing it. He's like, look what I found. Ding, ding. And a little bit later, because he keeps doing this for a while, and then a little bit later into the film, you can hear the bell ringing, and Jennifer Aniston's like, Ozzy, will you stop ringing that bell? And they both like looked at, like, Ozzy, Jennifer Aniston, and the kid like look at the bell that's on the table. It wasn't him. So they're scared shitless. And of course, Leprechaun's doing all these crazy things. Like he sees a box of Lucky Charms, and he looks at it, and he's like, and he like takes a bite of some of them, and he's like, and spits them out. And there's another part when he puts his hand on on a lit burner on a stove, and he's like, we're cooking now, kids. Like it's one of those kind of like really quotable films. Try as they may, try as they might, who steals me gold won't live through the night. Like, this shit is ingrained in my head, man. I just think Leprechaun is one of those sort of, not slept on, I'm talking about the first one here. Like, I think it's kind of slept on. I don't think it gets, like, the same type of attention that movies like Hellraiser get and, Nightmare on Elm Street, because those movies are really, like, scary. And, like, Hellraiser I don't think has any funny in it, but Nightmare on Elm Street 1 has a little bit of funny dashed in there, but at the same time it's scary as fuck. Whereas Leprechaun, it's more on the, kind of humorous, not say like Evil Dead 2 funny, but like it has its funny quotes in there and stuff. There's even another crazy scene that scared the shit out of me when I was a kid, when Jennifer Aniston, she goes to visit O'Grady, who's the guy that owned the house previously, had the stroke. And when she gets there, he sees him like sitting up against the window, like in a wheelchair, like looking out the window, and she goes up to him, and then all of a sudden, she turns him around, and it's the leprechaun, and he's chasing her through this fucking old folks home, and then she gets into the elevator, and the body of O'Grady like comes flying through the elevator shaft, and he's like, the power of the clover, and all this shit. I probably should have made this video on St. Patrick's Day, but whatever, man. I'm having fun because I think, I'm all over the place, but the ending of this movie, I still love. I love to death, because Leprechaun's like, he goes into this barn and he like makes this like badass little vehicle that has like, total like death race kind of vehicle, and he attacks the gang. And there's a cool scene where they're digging through this clover patch looking for a 4-leaf clover, and Ozzy's like, well, there's one. Oh, never mind. And then eventually they do find one, and I really like that, because Jennifer Aniston is so like, not believing any of this shit for a large part of the film. Well, she believes the leprechaun, but it's, the magic and all that. Like, it's, you gotta believe, Tori, and all this shit. But yeah, the ending of the film, when the little kid, Alex, takes his slingshot, total Bart Simpson shit, and he like takes I don't know if it's a rock or whatever it is, but he ties a 4-leaf clover around it, shoots the leprechaun in the face. He's like, fuck you, Lucky Charms, and he just gets him right in the mouth, and he falls down to a well, and then just kind of that scene in its own is very good practical effects, and the practical effects all throughout the film are good. Like there's a crazy scene where they go to this pawn shop to try to pawn one of these gold coins or to see how much it's worth, and the leprechaun shows up and he kills the pawn shop owner, and like with a pogo stick. Like he jumps on this guy's body with a pogo stick. And I remember like the scene that's like in slow motion that leads up to him like hopping on. I think if you've seen the movie, you know what shot I'm talking about. That scared the fuck out of me. And the scene out in the woods with the cop, like, the cop's like chasing the leprechaun around. Because like Leprechaun, after he kills this pawn shop guy, he steals one of those like little tiny vehicles. I always wanted those when I was a kid, like a little car, like a little Hummer or whatever it was, Jeep type thing. And he's driving down the highway in this thing, and the cop stops him. He's like, what the fuck? And it's funny because like the leprechaun has like a stuffed bear like with him in the car, which I always thought was hilarious. And the cop's like, how old are you? And he's like, I'm 139 years old. And he's just like, nice makeup, kid, or nice costume, kid. Now get out of this car. And he like kicks the car, and the leprechaun just fucking owns him. It's awesome. That's a good shot, or a good scene rather. But I think I've made my point, man. I love Leprechaun. I think that it's one of those movies that you need to check out at least once. Honestly, you could probably skip all of the sequels. There's quite a few. There's ones, I think the second one he goes to Las Vegas, third one, maybe it's the third one he goes to Las Vegas, I'm not sure. And then eventually, I think the fourth one, he goes to space. And then when he comes back from space, there's two where they're in the hood type movies, which they're okay. I remember my brother watching those a lot when we were younger. Or when he was, we were both younger, and I think it was Leprechaun in the Hood 2, Back to the Hood, I believe it was called. But like they're okay to watch. Like there's a scene where Leprechaun's smoking out of a bong. I remember the one guy, like when they get the gold, like the Leprechaun's gold. I remember like the one he trades it all for weed. He has like this garbage bag of weed, and the other guy buys a gun and it keeps jamming, or some shit like that. Like, see, those ones to me are kind of throwaway. I'm not really into those later sequels, and you could probably skip that one, Origins. Although, like, if they had to use, like, a practical, cool, like, leprechaun, like the other ones, instead of this kind of, I know what they were going for. They were going for, like, more of, like, the mythical creature of leprechaun as opposed to, like, the, Hallmark, kind of leprechaun. So, what wasn't for me. But Leprechaun Returns, I thought was great. So, yeah, man, with that being said, stay tuned for a channel update coming soon. Stay tuned for all new videos. Subscribe. And with that being said, adios. Have a great rest of your weekend.